week we're moving on to the second unit of the course, poetry. Some of you might have a great deal of experience reading poetry. For others, this might be entirely new. If that's the case, you'll need to adopt different reading strategies than you use when reading prose. I've posted a few guides in your modules to help with this. Oftentimes when we think of poetry, we think of Shakespeare's sonnets or an inspirational poem by someone like Robert Frost. This, though, is just one type of poetry called lyric poetry. Lyric poetry is probably what you think of when you imagine a poem. A shorter text that expresses the thoughts or emotions of the speaker and usually has a set form or rhythm. It dates back to the earliest examples of writing and is featured as part of the literary development of most cultures. It can be distinguished from dramatic and narrative poetry. Narrative poetry is a poem that tells a story and is one of the earliest kinds of literature. Classic texts like Beowulf and the Odyssey are narrative poems. Dramatic poetry presents a scene in spoken form and sometimes as a monologue with one speaker and sometimes as a dialogue. In both narrative and dramatic poetry, you'll see clear characters and a plot, much like you would find in fiction. Reading lyric poetry, though, is a bit different from reading prose text or even narrative poetry. The meaning is often more difficult to determine because the language is much more minimal, and writers rely significantly on imagery, symbolism, and even the sound and rhythm of the poem to bring across the meaning. They also adopt different personas, so even when it may seem like the poems are expressing the emotions of the author, there is a different unnamed speaker or alternate viewpoint being explored. This week's readings will be different from your readings from previous weeks. Instead of just presenting a story, you're going to be reading a section on how to read and understand a specific aspect of poetry, like the speaker, structure, language, and imagery. Then you'll be introduced to a lot of poems from various writers and time periods. It's important to read both the informational section and all of the poems. It's all fair game for the final exam, and I'm only going to do an overview in these videos. This is a class all about reading, after all. For your writing assignments, though, you'll be focusing only on the poems that you decide are the most interesting. As always, remember your discussion board and reading journal, and keep working on your first writing project. Remember you have 3 options: analysis, research, and creative. This first project must focus on the first unit on fiction, so pick one of the assigned short stories as your focus. And remember, you have to write each type of project at some point. So if you do analysis for fiction unit, you cannot do it again for poetry or drama. Choose wisely. It's a big project, so don't leave it to the last minute. Let me know if you need help, and happy reading.